Attention musicians of all levels. It's not always easy picking out a song by ear. Sometimes you need a little help. Well, I have the app for you. Whether you're a professional musician or a beginner, Ultimate Guitar is an amazing app. For just $2.99, you get the chords and tabs on guitar, bass, or ukulele for over 1 million songs. They're all available at your fingertips. You also get tools like a tuner, metronome, chord library, lessons, videos, and more. You can find out any song you want. It also has like transpose button. It has auto scroll that you can change the speed to so you can play along with the song. A lot of the songs have the lyrics there so you can sing along with them. Ultimate Guitar is an amazing app. Just go to ultimateguitar.com or download the app to your phone today and start playing. Start playing any song you want. Ultimate Guitar, that's the place for you. Let's get down.
And you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here?
It's time for How Did I Get Here? And now here is your host,
All right, hello. I'm Johnny. I'm your host. Welcome to the show. I hope you guys have all had a good week so far. I guess it's Friday when this comes out. I'm doing this intro on Wednesday because I'm leaving town on Thursday to play a show with Skyrocket in Houston, and I didn't know if I'd have time to do this before I left, so I'm doing it now, baby. Wednesday. Yeah, that's right. Hey, gang, if you're listening to this show the day that it comes out, Friday, November 18th, Skyrocket is returning to Mercer Dance Hall for the first time in 3 years. We were there in like November or December of 2019, right before everything locked down. And since everything's opened back up, we haven't been back to Dripping Springs, but we are going back there the day that this show drops, Friday, November 18th. So if you live in the Texas Hill Country or somewhere accessible to Dripping Springs, come on out and see Skyrocket. We play at like 8 or 9. Go to skyrockettheband.com for more information, for ticket information, if you want to find out if Skyrocket's coming to a town near you, because we're playing next Saturday in San Antonio. We're playing at Antone's in December. We're doing a New Year's Eve show in Houston. It's all going off, baby. So if you want to find out more about Skyrocket, go to skyrockettheband.com. Gang, I want to talk to you a little bit about rock and roll photography, iconic photography that has inspired so many musicians, including myself. Ever since I was a kid, I would see, my mom, I had a young mom. She had cool friends. They had like Rolling Stone and rock magazines in the early 70s when I was a kid, and I'd look at them. I'd look at album covers when I'd listen to them, because it was back in the 70s. There were no videos to watch or anything like that. You just lay back and look at these pictures of your favorite bands. I remember, I don't even remember if I was listening to T-Rex and looking at the Electric Warrior cover, but someone had given my mom T-Rex, the Electric Warrior, at some point in the early 70s. And I remember just looking at that album cover, that gold silhouette of Mark Bolan playing in front of that giant Marshall stack. Like, fuck yeah, what's that guy doing? Who is that guy? That's the thing, is you get into this thing of like, who is that guy? Or who is that lady? What is going on here? But then it moved on to like Kiss, and when Kiss was famous, this is the only way I can describe it, is that you had no access visually to Kiss except for through these photographs that you would come across every time. And you would be blown away. You would be blown away. Like when I went and got Kiss Alive 2, I lived in Northern California. I lived in a town called Nicasio for like 9 months or something with my mom. And we had to go to another town that had a record store to get this record, right? So we're driving home from Petaluma, something like that, back to Nicasio, and I'm just looking at these photos of Kiss, and these photos are blowing. You know what I mean? Like there's this thing, like I could stare at these photos for days. Anyway, that went on forever, and then video kind of moved stuff out of that. But I've always been a fan of photography. I've had very dear friends. I was married to a music photographer, Tracy Gowdy. One of my best friends in the world is Todd V. Wolfson, the iconic Austin music photographer, amazing photographer. I'm dear friends with Ismael Quintanilla. I've worked with some great people like Danny Clinch and Marina Chavez and all this stuff, and they've always been really inspiring. I used to cut out magazine photos and hang them up on my wall with thumbtacks, like, on the wall. Like this picture is inspiring me to go out and be somebody. And really no artist embodied that sort of taking the visual medium to an extreme from such an early time as the late, great David Bowie, one of my favorite artists in the whole world as a music artist. But as far as like a visual artist, easily the greatest visual artist of all time, a person that really took you places with his vision and what he did. And I don't know, just like what he was doing with himself and visually, and what he was able to pull off with other photographers, and what he did finding these beautiful photographers. Well, gang, I have a great show for you guys today. Today I'll be talking to Modern Rocks Gallery, which is a great, iconic rock and roll photo gallery here in Austin, Texas. His latest exhibition is David Bowie, Starman. Anyway, I'll be talking to the owner of this gallery, who is also a photographer, but also a member of rock and roll. He was in Modern English. He toured with them from 1998 to 2002, and he was in this amazing indie rock British band that I've become a huge fan of since I found out about them from doing the research for this show, called the Auteurs. His name is Stephen Walker, and as I said, he is the owner of Modern Rocks Gallery. You heard me talk to Ed Cariff a few weeks ago, amazing, iconic rock photographer. Well, Modern Rocks Gallery just had an opening last Friday, and the gallery is open for you to come in and check out all of these photos. But the latest exhibition, as I said, is David Bowie, Starman, and it contains many of Bowie's most iconic shots obtained from the photographers themselves, including Terry O'Neill's Diamond Dogs album cover shoot, Justin de Villeneuve's Pinups album cover shoot with Twiggy, Brian Duffy's Aladdin Sane and Scary Monsters cover shoot, Masayoshi Tsukita's Heroes album cover shoot, as well as photos from Kevin Cummins, Jake Chesham, Marky Kinko, and many, many more. I went to Modern Rocks Gallery and sat down with their owner, Stephen Walker, and had a great, great, great conversation about music, about his time in modern English, about Telecaster guitars, but mostly about rock and roll photography, a lot about David Bowie photography, and a lot about this show and how he came to America and opened the Modern Rocks Gallery. It's a great, great conversation. He fell in love with Austin while on tour with Modern English, and he ended up in between tours and stuff working at this photo gallery in London, and really kind of getting the bug, getting the itch to start getting out there and having his own gallery and doing that stuff. So he moved to Austin and he opened this great gallery. It's at the it's at the 916 Springdale Road, Canopy Building 3. It's Building 3. It's a great, great, great gallery. You know where it is. Yard Dogs out there, all kinds of places. They have a coffee shop out there. They're actually open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, noon to 5 p.m. So you can go in there and see the David Bowie Starman exhibit. I have some photos that I posted, because it's not just all of these album cover photos. There's like amazing photos of him like hanging out with Elizabeth Taylor and all this kind of like just amazing stuff. You can go to modernrocksgallery.com for all of your Modern Rocks Gallery needs. And as I said, it's not just photos. They have books for sale there, amazing books, this amazing Bowie book that you can look through there. They also have bins and bins of photos that you can buy. As I said, it's a gallery. You can go there and buy stuff. So you can buy any of these photos, these prints. They have signed prints by some of these great photographers that they're showing. And more than likely, Stephen will be there. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, noon to 5 p.m., you go down there and check out the Modern Rocks Gallery at 916 Springdale Road, Canopy Building 3. Okay? What a great, great, great place. ModernRocksGallery.com. Go there and get it. It'll be up through the end of the year, this Bowie show, but he'll also be doing more. So when Stephen and I started talking, as I said, I went down to Modern Rocks Gallery to have this conversation with the great Stephen Walker. And when I was setting up the microphones, we kind of started talking about a Modern English album that came out in 2010, but they had recorded back in the early 2000s when Stephen was in the band. We're talking when this starts, I pushed record and we were already in the middle of the conversation, but it just kind of bled in. I didn't even know where to edit it to start it. So I thought I would just leave this part in. What we're talking about is a record called Soundtrack by Modern English that came out in 2010. It is a fucking great album. I suggest go out there and get it. It's really a great album. That's a great band. Robbie Gray has held on to his voice. Stephen Walker's Telecaster work on that record is unbelievable. And also go back and listen to the Auteurs. Great stuff. All right. So this is me and Modern Rock's gallery owner, Stephen Walker, chatting it up. Let's get down. Were you already out of the band, though, by the time that record came out?
Yeah, well, we'd just stopped touring. We weren't doing anything at that moment. So, we actually recorded the album a lot earlier. The album was recorded
in like 2002?
Yeah. So it was recorded then, but then it didn't... The record company kind of... It was a very small record label, and the guy that owned the record label, he had sort of a money man behind him, and the money man died. And basically, he was a kind of a guy that used to sort of a bit of a philanthropist who would sort of get involved in the arts and sort of fund art projects. And this guy died just as we'd finished the album. So his widow and the estate looked at all the projects he'd been involved in. There was an art gallery, there was our album, there was all sorts of things. And anything that was in the red, they were just like, done, finished. So they just cut the money off, and we just mixed it. So we couldn't get the album out. And then we shopped it for a few... We sort of... It was a bit depressing, really. We all sort of stopped, and we stopped touring for a bit, and it was all like, this is crap, isn't it? And then we got in touch with Darla Records, a guy called James, whose Darla's a really fucking great label.
Really?
And we spoke to James, and he loved it, and he was like, yeah, let's just do it. And he managed to get the masters. We didn't... Yeah, we actually handed over the masters to us, and then we cut it, and it came out. So I was glad it got out there, because there was an awful lot of work went into that.
Yeah.
And a lot of love as well, and it's a really important album for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's man, your playing on there is great, and your tones are... Like, that album's got balls.
It's Hugh Jones, the producer who produced Melt With You.
Oh, really?
Produced
Same
it.
guy?
Yeah. And, he was great. He was... And I really looked up to him anyway, because he produced Echo and the Bunnymen, and I loved Echo and the Bunnymen.
What records did he do with theirs?
All of them.
All of them?
All the early stuff. All that Crocodiles and all that Heaven Up Here.
Yeah.
So he produced all of that stuff. And I was a massive fan of Will Sargent. So the chance to work with Hugh... I mean, it's funny, because everyone was like, in modern English circles, like, oh my God, you're working with Hugh Jones again. And all I could think was like, I'm working with the guy who produced Echo and the Bunnymen. I was so happy.
Yeah.
And we did it in a residential studio up in Lincolnshire in the north of England. And we stayed in this kind of old church, actually. And the main live room was just sort of the whole sort of church room. We sort of stayed in the outhouses. Stayed there for about a month, 6 weeks doing it. And there's some great stuff happened there. I loved doing that album. It was just really cool. And I'm really fond of it still. I listen to it still. It still sounds fresh to me. I love it.
Yeah, it does sound fresh.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very... You seem like you come from... I listen to the Auteurs as well.
Yeah. Okay.
That stuff is... I love that. I really did. It's like awesome, like British early 90s indie rock is like exactly what I'm always looking for.
That was where I kind of cut my teeth, I suppose. It was doing... so my first band was a band called Spitfire that was a bunch of kids I was at school with. And it's really funny, actually, because the drummer in Spitfire... a guy called Justin Welsh. He's now the drummer in Jesus and Mary Chain. Oh, wow. And he was in town last week. And I've not seen Justin in a really long time. It's about 10 years. And he came through, and we'd spent a couple of days together hanging out. It was just really good to see him. And we were talking about it. And since we both left Spitfire, he then joined Elastica. He was Elastica's drummer. And then did another bunch of stuff, and now he's in the Mary Chain. And we talked about all the things we'd done over the years. And we both came to the conclusion that our days in Spitfire were the best of all of it. When we had no money, we were getting in the back of a shitty little van, going up and down the country, sleeping on people's floors. And we both sort of learned what it was like to be a musician back then. And even though we've both sort of been flown around the world first class and been on TV and stayed in a nice suite in the top hotel in town and all that, wasn't as fun as those days in Spitfire. I really enjoyed that.
You know, man, I'm a musician as well. And I've been playing like my whole life. as well. And there's those weird things, like you can literally play a gig one day in like, a stadium or something.
Yeah.
I was in this band Endosheen, and on Thursday night we played there's a thing called the Bud Bowl that happens with the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
It's like whatever. In the Super Bowl week in the city, the Super Bowl's in
Right.
whatever. So we opened for Stain, but like where the Astros playing, like, a stadium. And the next night we played at this like coffee house, 2-story coffee house place where when we walked up, they said, "Are you the musicians or are you the puppeteers?" Oh. And we were like, this is exactly this business. But I love that about it.
So
I just
sweet.
love like how weird it is.
People know when I started touring again with Modern English, we were like driving ourselves around doing loads of tiny clubs, and we were lugging our own gear in and out of the venues, and people couldn't quite believe to sort of see this band sort of just doing it themselves. And for me, that was like going back to my old days in Spitfire, where you did do it yourself.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in the Auteurs, it's a bit of a weird one because I'm a big guitar fan, obviously, and I got this lovely collection of Fender Telecasters and stuff, and I one Telecaster was my absolute favourite, and I suddenly realised one day that I never actually really touched it, apart from when I was on stage. It became sort of like my guitar tech's guitar. And there was one point we were doing a gig at the Whiskey A Go Go, and I did the sound check, and I turned around, and all of a sudden the guitar tech took the guitar off my neck and walked away with it. I'm like, "Oi, what are you fucking doing?" And he's like, "I'm going to change the strings on it." And I was like, "Okay." And he was a labour of love. He enjoyed doing it, and did a great job. And then when we got back on stage, I turned around, and as I spun round, he lifted it back, and I wasn't even carrying my own guitar on stage. It was like, and I suddenly was like, I don't like this anymore. I'm not enjoying this now. I'm kind of, I want to be a musician again, and being a musician is changing your own strings, and doing those funny little gigs and being, I talked to my kid who's asking me about stuff, and because we'd be an HEB and Melt with You'll come on, and he's like sitting there like, yeah, this is really cool, and this is my dad. And it's for him, it's kind of almost got quite normalised, I suppose. It's
sure.
Like, I play one of the songs my dad's involved in HEB, But for me, it was like talking to him about it, and he was like, "What? Yeah, we saw something on TV. I can't remember what it was, and there was a massive crowd." I was like, "I've done a gig like that." We saw footage of ACL Fest. That was it. We were watching ACL the other weekend, and I was like. He was like, "Oh, those gigs are really cool, Dad." And I was like, "I've done gigs that big. I played the Reading Rock Festival and this and that, and we did big gigs here and there." And he was like, "What was it like?" And I was saying to him, "They're kind of easy because you can't connect with people. You can stand there and there'll be a sea of heads in front of you, and you don't. The crowd are so far away, and you feel so kind of detached from it. It's really hard to kind of engage. Whereas if you're playing a small little club and there's only 11 people in there, you make eye contact with all 11 people and the bar staff and the doorman, and it's kind of like, and it's really personal and intimate and kind of actually a bit harder for me. I used to find smaller gigs are quite tough, but you get so much more enjoyment out of it.
Yeah.
That connection with people, and that's why we do it in the first place.
Yeah.
I didn't play guitar to, I play it for myself basically at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And the fact that I made a career out of it and did pretty well for a point, it was kind of that was nice. But I would be just as happy if that hadn't have happened.
Yeah. That's interesting. I've been talking to a lot of people lately that have been having that sort of thing, like, I don't really need to do this.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, the best one of that was Justin from the Mary Chain. Because he, as well as doing all the drumming and stuff, and he, for a little while, he was a drum tech. And it was interesting because we talked about when you stop playing, about still feeling connected to music. So for me, I got into photography and started photographing gigs. And that was my connection. And I sort of, because I spent so many years touring, I felt this connection with the stage. And I know what happens. I know the mechanics of what happens at a gig.
Yeah. And
I was getting some nice shots because I kind of knew how to second guess what was going on. I wasn't sort of doing it blind. I sort of was familiar with that territory.
Right. And
Justin, he became a drum tech, and he drum tech for Suede, and he now drum techs for the Pretenders. So he goes off and he tours with Jesus and Mary Chain, and when he's not doing that, he's drum checking for Martin Chambers. Wow. And he sent me all these great stories about Martin Chambers. Great, actually. But I was like, did you see that as a step down, going from being the drummer to being a tech, and he's like, no, I don't need to have all the adoration. I've done that. I've been there and done that. And he's like, for me, it's just feeling the connection. He says he enjoys teching just as much as he enjoys playing.
Yeah.
It's because his life is like behind the drum kit on the stage, and whether he's tightening up the lugs on the cymbals for Martin Chambers or whether he's bashing them himself, he's just as happy. I was so happy for him, because sometimes you stop playing, and it's a weird world when you stop playing. And
I've never stopped.
Yeah, well,
I'm scared.
I kind of have, and there's loads of we're like a couple of old men. I was like, I've got arthritis in my fingers and my knuckle joints hurt when it gets cold. And Justin was like, yeah, I wear a knee brace now. And every time that's what I thought about it. It's like, yeah, your bass drum pedal, you've been whacking that for like 30 years now, 40 years. And there's like, no wonder you got to wear a fucking knee brace. It's like,
Yeah.
But it's interesting sort of talking about stopping, and I know a lot of musicians that I've known a few musicians that sadly have committed suicide, and I know a lot of musicians who just really struggled with their identity when they stopped playing. So for me, doing the gallery was my way of still being involved, but not quite in the same way, but just as fulfilling.
Right. But it's like you're not doing it for your ego. Like, oh no, I'm not out of the game. But like you love it so much that it doesn't like that. That's the same thing with doing like this podcast. Like I love show business and music that even if it's just me talking to another person about it, it's exciting for me.
It's funny, Justin, when he came through, we had a couple of days together, and I'd not seen him in 10 years, and he was one of my best friends for a very long time. We did an awful lot together musically, and we toured together, made albums together, and so we hadn't seen each other for so long. And when I saw him again, we just sat, and we sat in Don's Depot. We just talked and talked about music, and it was so good. And we both afterwards were like, that's the best 2 days I've had in fucking years.
Yeah.
And it really means a lot, and not just connecting with an old friend, but just being able to talk to people about the slightly mad life we've led. 'Cause it isn't normal. Well, it's to me, but it's just an interesting one, talking to people about it. Some people get a bit starstruck, and the minute they find out what you did before, but it doesn't matter if I'll still be the same person if I work the checkout in HEB.
Yeah.
It's just me, and it was a job. But even though I didn't treat it like a job, it was a labour of love. It was just what I did.
Yeah.
And that's it. And I'll always do that. And someone the other day was, you always do stuff that's really cool. And it's like, well, I don't do it because it's cool. It's because I want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you want to do cool stuff.
Yeah,
you don't want to go do some shit you don't want to do. That's crappy and not fulfilling.
I want to be happy. And I want to, at the end of the day, you want to be true to yourself, and I don't want to compromise myself if I can help it. So doing the gallery has been.
When did you open this gallery?
It's a bit of a weird one actually, because I suddenly realised the other day it's actually been 9 years.
So you were here when Bale was here.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was here. Yeah.
I've been here a lot to those.
So I moved from London in 2013, I think it was. Yeah, 9 years ago. With a dream of opening the gallery, and basically. I was working at a different sort of gallery in London for a friend. I'd stopped touring, and this lead singer of Modern English, his best friend, Dale. Dale's an incredible person, and he had this business selling rocks and minerals and fossils and crystals and stuff like that. And he went from doing a really small market stall on Portobello Road that I used to work for him on Saturday mornings. I have to get up at 6 a.m. with a hangover and go and unpack all these rocks and crystals and stand there and try not to be grumpy.
The grumpy crystal salesman.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone comes. It's really funny because I'd set up the market really early in the morning and be really tired and hungover and not in the mood. If it was raining, even worse if it was raining.
Yeah.
And then people, because it's all crystals and stuff, it was all kind of like crystal healing happy, and I'd be really fucking grumpy. I'd be like, wouldn't even give them a smile before I'd had a coffee or a donut or whatever. But I used to do that with him, and then we went from a really small market stall to a shop and then a really big gallery in Chelsea, and he's now churning over $1 million a year with his business. We built it up from nothing. But at the time I was doing this, but doing it for someone else, and it got really big, and it was like, do I really want to be doing this always for doing stuff for someone else? And my wife turned around and said, well, you do realise if you can open your own gallery, you can do what you want in there and do exactly the same job you've done, but it's all for you. And straight away,
be really successful.
And it's like, well, I've proven that I can be successful at running a gallery. So what if? So I remember there's a gallery that I used to walk past on my way to work with rock photography in the windows. And it was my world, you know. It was like that was my little gateway. And I used to walk past it and just stop, and I'd be late for work most mornings because I'd be like too busy looking through the windows at these beautiful prints. And I didn't even at the time realise that rock photography was a thing that, you know, that was a fine art thing, that sort of connection. But I always thought rock photography was stuff that was produced in magazines and produced but then an album covers. But there was this sort of gateway into fine art.
Right.
And we had this idea. It's like, well, let's do it, but it's like, I can't do it in London. It's like, why not? Well, because the gallery already exists, and there's another one down the road. So, don't want to do it in New York or LA because, you know, swapping a big city for another big city, I don't know if it's going to knock me in. It's like, where could we go that is kind of cool enough that would accept something like this and actually have people that will want to buy this stuff,
Right.
And also kind of scratch the itch for us. Is like, is there going to be things to do there? Is there going to be music to go and see?
Yeah.
And I just remember coming through Austin on tour. I remember we did a gig at Stubbs, open air thing at Stubbs, with was it Stubbs? Yeah, it was. Did a gig with Fastball years ago, and just as we were about to play, it absolutely pissed down the rain, Texas style, like literally like monsoon from naught to, like it's going to happen here this afternoon, from naught to monsoon in 20 seconds.
Yeah.
And we're just about to play it, and this monsoon, and the crowd just stood there. I remember standing at the side of the stage going, what are you doing? You're just standing there getting soaked. And then the rain stopped, and we came out, and we played, and everyone went nuts. And it was like, everyone was drenched. And I just thought, this place is great. People love their music here.
Yeah.
So I remember sitting in the Continental afterwards, having a drink. And I remember turning around to the drummer and saying, Johnny, I could live here. I like this place. This place is really cool. And he was like, yeah, I know what you mean. And then years later, I called him up. I was like, guess where I am? I was like, well, I'm in Austin. He went, I knew it. I knew you'd do that. So to me, Austin was the obvious choice.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day as well, you could turn around and say, well, if it doesn't work here, well, let's go somewhere where it will work. You know, you've got to be flexible, and you've got to kind of be fluid about it and be prepared to fall down, be prepared for it to possibly not work. But so I came here with like 12 prints. I called that gallery up in London and said, I'm moving to Austin, Texas. I'm going to open a gallery there. And they were looking to break the States with their product as well, if you like. And I was pretty surprised. They were like, okay, yeah, you can have some prints from us. So I rocked up, and I had about 12 or 14 prints and just put them on the wall. My desk, I'm sitting in the gallery now, but my desk was like there, and there was nothing behind. There was nothing here really. No. And I brought over some rocks and stones from London as well. My going away present, my boss was like, you can have 10 grand's worth of stuff. And I was like, is that retail or wholesale? And I went around picking up, I was like, well, that, and that. And I bought this collection of rocks with me as well. And we called it Modern Rocks Gallery, and the idea was that it was rock and roll and rocks. And if one didn't work, we'd sort of slowly ditch it and focus on the one that does work.
I don't see any rocks in here.
Yeah, there's your answer. I think there's one over there on my desk. But that's it. That's the answer. The rock and roll works. And it took a long time. And we didn't represent anybody local. We didn't represent any massive photographers. But we had this... I kind of curated quite well, I thought. I bought some really cool prints over. Some prints of like the Sex Pistols and Bob Dylan, and sort of a bit of an eclectic mix. And then I met Kirk Weddle, who is the photographer for the Nirvana Nevermind album cover. And I'd seen the outtakes of the band in the pool. So I got in touch with him, and we were chatting. I was like, look, I've opened this gallery. Can I sell some prints? And we met and got on really, really well. And again, really trusting from him. He sort of just went, yeah, let's just try it. Why not? It's some sort of attitude, really. It's like, you won't know unless you try. So we started representing the prints here, and it was the same time as Montage of Heck, the movie, came out. And I got in touch with the newspaper in Seattle. I thought someone's going to want to write about this in the newspaper in Seattle. So they ran the story and ran a few pictures. And then the next morning, it got picked up all over the place. It got picked up by the Daily Mail, which is a tabloid in the UK.
Oh, wow.
And they printed it. And what's really weird was that they published it in the UK. And then the next day, I'm getting phone calls from Billboard and from MTV online, and they wanted to run the story. And then, like, Consequence of Sound wanted to run it. And so it just... And then, of course, it goes global.
Right.
And we were selling tons of prints. And I didn't even know how to pack prints up. I'm like... how do I ship these things? We're literally making up as we
Right,
go
right.
along. And it's like, let's get some tubes. Where'd you get tubes? I'm Googling, where do you buy tubes? And it's like looking at plumbing shops. They're not plumbing tubes. No, we want, art tubes.
Yeah.
And we just we got a load of attention. And from that, I just started to pick up some really cool photographers, and it just snowballed and snowballed. And now I'm dealing with a lot of the big boys and girls in the business. And that's, I'm sitting there with really rare Terry O'Neill prints on the wall.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the holy grail. And I did not, I always dream really big, but I genuinely didn't think I'd be at this level.
Yeah.
So, the moral of this story is just follow your dreams, don't give up. The only person that stops you from doing stuff is you.
Yeah.
You really, if you want to do something, anything, you just gotta fucking go for it.
Yeah.
You have to. You just gotta trust yourself, trust your instincts. And I've done that with my music and everything. And it's just, I'm trying to get that across to my kid as well. It's like, you can do or be anything you want to do or be. You really
How old are
can.
they? How old is your kid?
He's 11. He's going to be 12 in April. But, he's just started middle school. So it's that kind of like, okay, sunshine, you're on the, it's starting to get serious now.
Yeah.
So you need to just, it's that transition between being a little kid at school to being pre-high school.
Yeah.
And it's kind of quite an interesting age for him to be. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's a weird one. But I just sort of saying to him, it's just, you're in charge of this. This is your destiny now. You can do what you want to do, sunshine. I'm not ever going to stop you. I mean, my dad was a musician before, but when I was born, was a sales rep for a office stationery company. He wasn't like a musician at that point, but he had been Wilson Pickett's drummer on Wilson Pickett's the UK tour.
Wow.
He was in a band called the Statesides, and he was a great drummer. And when everyone else was doing kind of the Beatles and the Stones in the UK, Dad was listening to Soul and Stax stuff on him.
Oh.
So he had this band called the Statesides. He was the drummer, and they got picked up to be Wilson Pickett's backup band on his one and only UK tour.
That's amazing.
He did that tour, and what this is for me, the bit that nails it is that after that tour, Wilson Pickett's management was like, okay, we got another artist coming over. She's doing a European tour. Her name's Tina Turner. She was with Ike, but she's gone off on her own. So, can you be Tina Turner's backup band for a massive European tour? But this is kind of 1966. This is pre-internet. This is pre able to phone home. This is kind of. And my mum was pregnant with my sister, so he was going to miss the birth of his first kid. They were all apprentices. They all had apprenticeships in various jobs. My dad was an engineer at what was BOAC, which is British Overseas Airlines, which is now British Airways, if you like. So he was an engineer for British Airways as an apprentice at the age of 17, and he would have lost his apprenticeship. And in 1966, you don't do stuff like that. Yeah. So they all sat down and went, well, we did the Wilson Pickett, and then we got offered Tina Turner. So something else would come along, and it never did. Never did. And he'd have reunions with the band when they were in their 60s and 70s, and they're still kind of bitter about it. They still talked about it, and they're like, oh, fuck, what if?
Yeah.
And so my thing has always been,
don't be that guy.
No what ifs.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to sit there when I'm 60 and be like, what if I'd done that one? Oh, crap,
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Do you still play it all? I mean, like,
not
just around the house.
At home, around the house a bit. Not enough, to be honest.
Is that a deluxe?
No, that's a bit of a Frankenstein one that I did with a friend of mine. So we years and years and years ago, this is mid 80s, I'd say. A friend of mine, we worked on that one afternoon. We both decided not to go to work, and we would just play guitar stuff all day. And it was that sort of custard yellow. We put paint stripper on it, and we got rid of the paint and got it down to just the wood. And he put the pickup in it, and then the deluxe pickup in it, and then we sort of put it back together. And we didn't lacquer it, and I toured it for a bit and did a bunch of gigs with it. And then I lacquered it without cleaning it first, so I lacquered all the shit into it, basically.
Oh.
So that
funky.
And it's a good looking guitar, and it's been a lot of places with me. That one, that was my first proper guitar.
Yeah.
So
I have a Frankenstein telly with 3 pickups. It used to have a straight up humbucker in the neck position, but now I have a P90 thing in there that's really good. A friend of mine put in.
Yeah. I've also got a thin line.
Oh, yeah.
I've got a deluxe as well, a proper deluxe. But my favourite is the thin line.
Yeah.
It's just got this tone. And when I was doing that Modern English album as well, actually, Hugh Jones was like, there's a guitar shop down the road. Let's go and see if we can rent something. And we got, it just come out at the time, the George Harrison Rosewood telly.
Oh, yeah.
That thing was fucking heavy. It's like a paving slab with a neck on the end of it.
My friend Kyle got one of those.
So heavy.
Yeah.
But so on the album we used that, and we used my thin line.
Wow.
And the contrast, you're talking about tones, it's like they somehow just both filled this really nice gap of, Yeah. Now I can talk about that stuff all day long. I love it.
Those Telecasters do have like a bite to them that is really...
You got to kind of wrestle with them. It's like I played Les Pauls before, and the Les Paul plays you, but with the telly you actually got to wrestle with it. You have a little fight with it because the neck's kind of like you got to strangle that thing to get And I always used to love watching. You play Rickenbackers, but watching Paul Weller with the Jam.
Yeah,
and literally him and the guitar literally having a fist fight on stage. And that's always been like growing up listening to sort of like the Clash and the Jam and stuff like that as well. I've always had that. That Wilco Johnson kind of like Dr. Feelgood style of just like really rhythmic and really kind of like choppy, and this is like again with the Bunnymen as well, that sort of angular, choppy kind of like rest of, and the Telecaster tones would always just kind of rip your neck off. I
got that. It was like a new wave of what I don't know if you guys consider it new wave there, but there was like a real angularity to like the new wave of the early 80s that I picked up on the Auteurs record, like in those tunes.
Yeah, definitely. It was my kind of thing. And Luke Haynes, the singer and songwriter in that was a world he really knew as well. And we were sort of the same sort of age, and we both grew up with the same sort of stuff.
What was it that got you? Like, I know your dad played music, but what was it what made you want to do it? Was there a show or a song or?
No, I don't know. For me, when I I always grew up with music in the house.
Right.
So, the radio would be on, or there'd be music playing all the time. And then we'd go over to my grandma and granddad. So my granddad was an opera singer, and he was Welsh, Welsh male voice choir. So he was into his classical stuff. So we'd go over there, and my granddad would be blasting. He was bloody deaf as well, so he'd be playing it really loud. And you'd hear, music everywhere, basically. And I always... Interesting for me is that Dad always used to talk about the band, not just I was a drummer. It was like I was in a band, and it was all about being in a band, and that camaraderie. And there's the thing that I say, like catching up with Justin the other day. In fact, that's what you talk about.
Yeah.
Do you remember when we, And for me, you look at bands like the Clash, and it's like Rule One looked like a band, and it was finding that gang, that tribe, and you had this kind of this shared kind of like belief and this shared kind of like passion and journey that you were on together and making music together. And I always just wanted to be in a band rather than be a bloke who plays guitar.
Right.
So I was always a band person. So, and it was everything about it. It was also, trying to fit drums in the back of your car and trying to get to this gig and that gig and just all of it for me.
Yeah.
We used to do our own flyers and posters for gigs. And I used to enjoy getting those out as well.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved making them. Like me and a guy, like in your first bands, and you go to like, I don't know if you guys had Kinko's there.
Yeah.
We'd go to Kinko's. Yeah. There was a 24-hour Kinko's where if you slipped a guy a joint, you could make as many copies as you wanted for $10.
Yeah, me and Jeff, the singer from Spitfire, we used to go and get the lecture set out.
Yeah.
Pre-computers.
Yeah.
And we'd go cut pictures out of magazines. Glue them down, lecture set, and then and this is a gig that we'd arranged in a local pub. We'd go to the pub and be like, "Can we do a gig in your back room next Saturday?" And he's like, "Yeah." So we'd just do it all from start to finish. We were our own promoters, paste up artists, everything, and we did all of it. And that was great. And I just didn't want to do anything else from that point on.
It's exciting. It's exciting. Yeah, it's exciting even just talking about it.
Jeff has got all those original flyers and posters we did from the like mid '80s for all these gigs we did.
Yeah,
and it's just like there's a pub called the Apple Tree where I grew up in Crawley, which is just south of London.
Okay,
and it was like, 7 o'clock Saturday night, Spitfire at the Apple Tree, with support from Charles Cold and whoever it was. It's just, I loved all that stuff. That was all for me. That was all part of the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was something about being in a band. I remember like being a little kid and like like Help came on TV.
Yeah.
And I watched it, and you're like, wait a minute. Like, there's a world where you don't have to get married and move to the suburbs. Like, you can literally live with your bros in one house and have a great time. Yeah. And then chicks chase you every time you
haven't got to sit in
leave.
a cubicle and have some arsehole telling you what to do. No, it was all, for me, it was all about, being in a band and just that feeling when you're in a rehearsal studio and someone comes up with a nice little riff and then all of a sudden the drummer starts drumming along to it and it comes together. That first time you run through something and it works, that is the best feeling in the world. Yeah. I've never topped that. Yeah. And then when you actually, it's funny actually, even when you record stuff and you listen back and you play back the stuff you record and listen to the albums or whatever, that still doesn't beat the first time you nail it in the rehearsal studio. Yeah. There's something about that, and it's really hard to, which then brings on to the subject of leaving bands. Because I remember saying to a friend once when I left Spitfire, I'd had enough, and someone was like, what was it like? And I was like, it's like having 5 girlfriends and you ring them up one after the other and you split up with them one after the other, and you'll find yourself saying, it's not you, it's me. We've gone in different directions. We're on a different path. And that's, the relationship you have with band members, and purely because of the magic you make. Yeah. And I always explain it to people as well that if you fall out with someone in your band, it's really hard to get it back as well.
It totally is.
Being in rehearsal studios, on tour, in buses. Having a great story once, I worked with this session drummer once who was, so when Pink Floyd got back together, Nick Mason just couldn't fucking stand to be even within 20 yards of the rest of the band. It was so toxic between all of them. Right. So they're doing this big tour, and this session drummer called Ray, who was an amazing drummer, he was asked to do the rehearsals with them. So he rehearsed with the band and would make notes. And they'd be just the way Roger wants the second chorus to be a bit heavier than the third chorus, blah, blah, blah. Right. He made these notes, and Nick Mason kind of got the notes. And Ray was good enough to get that across to him. Yeah. And so he would basically pay this guy to rehearse for him, and then what would happen was they'd do this big gig at Wembley Arena, and these limos would arrive, and they'd even arrive on different sides of the stage. And then they'd come, the first time they'd actually got within 2 feet of each other was on stage. Yeah. They would walk on, and Nick would come on stage left, and Roger would come on stage right, and they'd meet on stage, and then the minute they were finished playing, they were gone. Yeah. And I just thought it was so fucking sad. But then, having also fallen out with band members, I kind of get that as well. Yeah,
it's that kind of thing is like, especially like if you're in a van and it's like that, and you're like in Iowa, horrible. And you still got like 3 weeks left. Yeah, that shit's terrible.
And you got $10 in your pocket, and you're hungry, and you're hungover, and you kind of just want to go home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you miss touring though?
Yeah, I do. I really do.
Right after that description, you're like, I miss that.
Yeah, I miss that. I do. Best bit about touring was all the mad truck stops. Because coming from England, going to a Buckeyes or whatever it was called, you go
Buc-ee's.
Buc-ee's.
Yeah.
And it'd just be like, what? And Cracker Barrel. What the fuck are you walking to a Cracker Barrel?
That's the most American thing, isn't it?
It was just like, for me, growing up in England, like being in a Cracker Barrel in Illinois, on a Wednesday afternoon. Yeah. And I'm thinking the kids I was at school with are right now, they're working at the airport or they're working in a bank or whatever. And there's like, I'm at a Cracker Barrel in Illinois on a Wednesday afternoon. It's like, fucking yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I used to come home with so much. I used to buy fridge magnets. I used to come, my bags would be full of just crap. And I don't even know where any of it is anymore. But I think I probably kept Cracker Barrel in business by just buying all the crap in the shop. I used to love all that stuff. I come back with, especially with the first big tour I did with Modern English, we drove right across from New York to LA. And we're doing things like, as we go through New Mexico, getting out the van and buying Mexican wrestling masks and just mad shit and fireworks and just things, Yeah. I used to collect. I used to always have my bag, and I'd have a separate bag for my stuff. Yeah. And we'd come home from tour and just be like, why have I got a fridge magnet from from
Reno.
from Gary, Indiana.
Yeah, from
Why have I
Gary,
got-
Indiana.
I got a fridge magnet from Gary, Indiana. It's like, oh well, fair enough.
Yeah. Who, as far as like photography stuff, like what, obviously, like when you want to be a musician, those photos mean the world. Like they meant the world to me growing up, like Circus Magazine, Cream Magazine, Rolling Stone Magazine.
Yeah.
Iconic photos, like whatever that shoots from with Bowie where he's smoking.
That's the Heroes.
The Heroes
shoot.
album cover shoot.
Yeah.
That's not Heroes though, right?
Yeah.
That is Heroes.
The mad thing about
The actual one?
No, that's not the actual cover. That's,
Right.
They're all outtakes. But
Right, that's
the
what I'm
mad
saying.
thing about that shoot was, and we're talking about touring again, and the mad world we live in.
Yeah.
That photo shoot was done at an airport, and it was basically Iggy Pop was touring Japan.
Explain piano. Bowie?
Bowie just
Oh.
we just went along because
Oh.
he didn't have anything to do. He'd finished recording, finished touring for the moment. He had a few months off or whatever. And that whole thing, when you finish touring, you finish a tour, you don't know what the fuck to do with yourself.
Right.
So he got on a plane with Iggy Pop and just went to Japan and just hung with him on tour. And there was a press conference at the airport for Iggy Pop, and the conference table was all set up in the press conference. It was all ready to go. And Masayoshi Tsukita was the photographer and who worked with Bowie before, and he was just like, "Do you want to sit behind a desk and take some pictures?" So there's this whole sequence of pictures of him that were taken in literally 5 or 10 minutes before the press conference started. And then Bowie Storm was like, chose the album cover for Heroes. The shot for
Unbelievable.
that. So yeah, to be working with people like that now.
Yeah.
And Masayoshi is in his 80s and lives in Kyoto.
Yeah.
And I sell a lot of his prints, and it's just quite weird. Quite weird sort of dealing, I sort of fanboy out a bit.
Yeah.
And there's me earlier on saying about people getting starstruck. I get starstruck with the photographers
Me too.
I work with, because you just think the stuff they've produced, there's a massive connection between music and imagery, huge connection.
Yeah.
And if you think about back in the day, especially with someone like David Bowie, pre-internet, so Bowie was a shapeshifter, and he was constantly reinventing and had this massively strong image every time, was a different person.
Yeah.
From Aladdin Sane to Ziggy Stardust, he would like these entities he would create, and you have to get that message across to people who this person is, and you need the right photographer to do that. And
Yeah.
so these people were kind of part of Bowie's journey, and I think he always worked with really strong photographers that he got on well with and understood him and his vision, because he's trusting that photographer to make his vision a picture.
Yeah.
Because back then, pre-smartphones and internet, you would get the music press, or you'd get the album cover, and that's how you knew what it was all about.
Yeah.
So dealing with a lot of these people, that it wasn't just like a jobbing photographer that turned up, took a few pictures, and went home again. This is Masayoshi Tsukita was a kind of, he collaborated with Bowie
Yeah.
in so many ways and created those amazing pictures and helped him share his vision.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always been a massively important thing, the photography and the visuals that come with the music.
Yeah.
It's so to deal with these people on a daily basis is kind of like,
So, no, I hear you. Like when I met Ed, it
Yeah.
blew my mind. And every photographer I've met, like I was fortunate enough to do a few days being shot by Danny Clinch, and all of those Polaroids I have, like he gave them to me, and I just always was in awe of.
yeah, Danny's great.
It's great,
Yeah.
and also like what a cool dude, like
Yeah.
easily one of the coolest dudes I've
Yeah.
ever met. But like all of those, those things are the things that changed. What I was trying to get at the beginning was there was things like when I was like, I don't know, 5, 6, Electric Warrior. Someone gave my mom Electric Warrior.
Yeah.
And I could just look at that album cover like all day, just like,
Yeah.
and the inside of the inside photo, Sticky Fingers, where Mick's yawning.
Yeah.
Like how did you catch dude just hanging out and it's the greatest photo you've ever? I'm looking at this Sex Pistols photo and thinking, or the Clash, and thinking the same thing.
No, it's like you look at Clash album covers. It's like, you're a kid and someone says there's a band called the Clash. They're really good. You should check it out. You go and get the album. You look at the album cover, at the pictures, and you know immediately what to expect.
Yeah.
And music, it was definitely a lot more literal back then. It was like bands worked with photographers to create an image and create a look to help get across what they were all about.
Yeah.
and it's a massively important part of the jigsaw, if you like.
Yeah.
I don't think people take it for granted. It's just an album cover.
Yeah.
But it's like when you get a good album cover.
Yeah.
Fucking hell, man! You can't take that back. You know.
No. And also, like, I mean, it's interesting that you were saying that about Bowie and how strong his image changed, because in my mind, I just was like, wow, Scary Monsters was the record before Let's Dance.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, like
massive,
that's a complete overhaul,
So
complete makeover.
Yeah. There's one photographer I work with, an English guy called Jake Chesham, who's shot Bowie more recently in the 90s, and he shot him in a backyard, in a back garden in London, and Bowie's really relaxed, and he looks smiley and happy and a bit goofy in a couple of pictures. He's really totally relaxed, and he was like, yeah, it was nice. I kind of got him being David Bowie the human being rather than David Bowie the rock star. And he said they chatted, had a cup of tea in his back garden, and just got on really well, and took these really relaxed pictures. And he said literally 2 weeks later he saw him on tour, and he had his bleached blonde hair and his mad suit on, and he said he was a completely different person. And he was like, that was not the person I was hanging out with 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And he said if that shoot had happened 2 weeks later, I wouldn't have got the same pictures and seen the same person. It was like Bowie was this incredible kind of master of reinvention, wasn't he? And his different entities, the different personas, were vastly different when you look at it.
Yeah.
And it's like that's
I mean, Scary Monsters to Let's Dance is.
yeah.
It's almost like, why aren't there like 5 albums in between those so you can see the
Yeah,
progression? Like that dude just literally
yeah.
did a 180.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tin Machine.
Yeah.
I mean, that I think to me, I've become friends with
Yeah,
Tim Palmer.
Yeah.
And Tim was saying before, it was kind of like he was David Bowie. He was successful. That was it. He was done. Stick a flag in me. He doesn't need the money. He hasn't got to pay the mortgage. He's not got to worry about getting groceries. It's like he is a global superstar. But he wasn't kind of happy.
Yeah.
Because he's an artist and he's a musician, and you constantly want to scratch your own itch.
Yeah.
And being David Bowie possibly meant he couldn't do that.
Right.
Because there's all these expectations from record labels. You're always as good as your last hit. So when's the next one? What's the next one, David?
Yeah.
Come on, when's the next one? And after having years of going through all these various personas, he was like, I just want to do David Bowie. I just want to be in a band.
Yeah.
And then he gets this mad bunch of musicians together, and they make this music that isn't commercial. But
No, not at all.
He was so fucking happy doing it.
Yeah.
You know, and Tim was saying it was like he was just in his element. And they would do stuff. They'd do a track, do one take, and the band would be like, "Yeah, that's good enough." And he's like, "What?" And they're like, and then they'd look at Bowie, and Bowie would be like, "Yeah, it's great. I love it. It's got the energy. Let's do it." And that was it.
Yeah.
There was this kind of, and I think Tin Machine freed him of the shackles of being David
yeah.
Bowie. And so then after that, he then came up with some incredible David Bowie music.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, like, knocked it out of the park. Like, and to have that level of success for so many years,
Yeah.
he needed to take that Tin Machine coffee break in the middle.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe the later stuff wouldn't have existed.
Have you met Hunt?
I've not, and I want to. I tell you, so when I was doing this album with Spitfire, and Justin, again, keep talking about Justin again from the Mary Chain, he was like, we watched Tin Machine, and we were like, oh, this is Bowie's new thing. It's called Tin Machine. And we were in the studio, and it was on the TV in the sort of rest room. Started watching it, and Justin went, oh, by the way, check out Hunt's bass drum. And his bass drum was as big as a fucking bus.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've never seen anyone hit drums like him.
No.
It was just like he hit them so hard, but tastefully and with style.
Yeah.
And it was just like, what an incredible drummer he was. And Justin was in awe of him. And we were like looking at the size of that bass drum and the noise he made was just like, oh my God. You know, and then I found out he's here in town. I'd love to meet him because he seems like a supremely great person.
Yeah. As he would say, he's a nice bunch of guys.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think that's how he described me to a mutual friend of ours. But no, he's a great. We're friends. He's nuts.
Yeah, yeah. No,
He's got a fucking cool band called the Hunt Sales Memorial.
I've got to check that out.
Oh, it's intense. I think it's on
follow
Spotify.
his Instagram. He looks like a scream. Sort of person
Yeah.
You want to go and get drunk with, but also have an escape plan afterwards.
Yes. Or you'd want the escape plan planned well before.
Yeah, you say, I'm going to meet you at 8:00, and then you order your Uber for 11.
Yeah. You know, I met him. It's funny because I grew up with Soupy Sales.
Yeah.
You know, like he was on kids shows when I was a kid. So he was like a star. And so it was funny when I first met him. I was engineering a record that he was producing for a country artist.
Okay.
And we ended up hitting it off and just really. He's actually also one of the funniest people in the world.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
But yeah. What were we saying? Oh, we were talking about photography.
Yes. Yeah.
So then did you start shooting like in the time of film or anything? Like you said you started taking pictures yourself?
So I did this one tour with Modern English. You know, we did long tours. They were, you know, we'd be on tour for 3 months at a time, 2 months at a time. And it gets really boring. Everyone thinks it's quite glamorous, but it isn't really. It isn't. You make your own glamour, but on the surface, it's pretty dull actually. An awful lot of time sat in your arse in a bus, looking out the window, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. America's a big country.
Yes,
as I found out. And you know, when you go from one end to the other, you do a lot of mileage. So I mean, we toured like 44 states, I think it was. We worked out we did in the space of a few years. When the only ones we didn't do are the ones that were like Hawaii, because no one would pay for our flights, you know. So a lot of touring, and at the time I was dating this girl who's a fashion photographer, and I used to assist her on shoots, and I used to help her do her edits. And she was like, "You've actually got a really good eye. You understand photography." So she gave me a camera, her first ever camera that she had when she was a kid. I'm on this tour, and she went, "Just go and document this tour. Just go and take pictures of it." So I did. I really made it my thing to do, and it gave me a real focus. So I just took pictures on the road, and then got back and got the film process, and it was like, actually, there's some really nice stuff in here, and it kind of got me into it all of a sudden. So then a little bit later, I decided I wanted, when I stopped touring, I wanted to start shooting. So got myself a camera and went out and started shooting bands, and like I say, I felt really comfortable with it because it was a world I really knew and understood, and I understood the sort of nuts and bolts of gigs and how it works. So I did all right, and then I sort of had a few pictures published. Sort of, went for it, and then I suddenly found I had quite interesting access because I did a thing with Modern English. We did this festival somewhere, and it was us and Devo. So I sort of chatted up the Devo guitar tech, so he's letting me shoot from the side of the stage where no one else could and stuff like that. So I just sort of, just enjoyed it, and then it was like, you don't make a lot of money shooting live stuff. It's more of a labour of love, really, and it opens the doors to other things, I suppose. I mean, it was a world I really loved being in for a little bit, but it wasn't quite enough. And then the whole sort of gallery thing came to mind, and it's when loads of worlds collide, and there's this kind of like sonic boom. And there you are, a few years later, and Yeah,
can I ask you a couple of things that are technically probably stuff we should have talked at the top of this?
Absolutely.
You know what? Heather and those guys never get mad at me. They're really, really nice.
Yeah, they're great.
But I always feel like, oh no, I didn't do the thing they probably wanted me to do at the top of the thing. But you're okay. So this place is open daily, or
no, we're open
by appointment?
Yeah, it's a bit weird, really. We used to be open 5 days a week, but then COVID kind of hit, and things got a bit confusing. So at the moment, we're open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday from noon till 5, and then by appointment any other day. I mean, I love this place, so it's like I'm quite happy to come down here on a Tuesday afternoon or whatever. So, and I'm usually here quite a lot. If if one of those things, if you see I'm here, knock on the door and come in.
Yeah.
But officially, we're open Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Okay. How often? I wish I could have gotten this out before the opening, just so that I could announce that Tim Palmer was judging the Bowie lookalike contest, the Bowie costume contest. I love that dude. He's
great.
He really is great. So, how often do you have?
Again,
open?
COVID kind of made things a bit weird. So
was the Cariff one the first one you've had since?
No, we did just before that. We did Rolling Stones' Exile on Main Street.
Oh, nice!
And that was original prints from. So when they did that Exile on Main Street, Norman Seeff art directed and photographed stuff for the cover, and they gave away with the first pressing of Exile on Main Street. It was a set of 12 postcards, and I had the original prints.
Wow!
From the set of postcards. Which again came with an amazing story, because in the middle of all these prints, you're looking at all the people and the images, and there's no Bill Wyman, and there's some dude with long hair and a beard, and it's like, who's that? And it's like, well, apparently they turned up and they were building this set that they were going to be shooting them coming off a boat, like the Titanic, if you like, because they were exiled out of the UK because Mick Jagger got this massive tax bill and they had to leg it. And they'd been drinking all day, and Bill Wyman was like, he was on his way out, and by then he was like, oh, fuck this, I'm out of here. So he just left. And Norman Seeff was like, we need a fifth member of the band. So who do we get? And then it's like, whose number have we got? And it's like, we've got the local drug dealer's number. We'll give him a call. So he came down. He probably bought some things with him.
Yeah.
And then he stood in for Bill Wyman. But the mad thing is that when you look at the postcards, you see Bill Wyman's face on this body. And the reason is that Norman Seeff was a surgeon before he was an art director and photographer in South Africa, where he was born. And he basically got some pictures of Bill Wyman and cut them out with a scalpel and stuck them on.
Oh, wow.
Pre-Photoshop. It was a primitive scalpel Photoshop job. So now we had those prints here, which was great. So we did that show, and then straight after that we did Ed Karif, and then straight after that we're doing this Bowie one. So we did 3 shows in a row, and that was basically because we hadn't done a show for 2 years. I kind of just thought, let's just kind of let's just go for it and let everyone know we're back and we're big and we're better than ever. And since then, I've got a few other things that come on my plate. I'm going to probably do about 3 or 4 shows next year. We'd like to do at least one every sort of 3 months. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And pulling it together. But I also, my thing with the gallery has always been, I want people to come in whenever they're over this side of town. And every time they come in, I want them to see different stuff on the walls. So to be honest, if you came here a month ago, out of all the prints on the walls, there's only about 3 prints that were on the walls a month ago. It's all new stuff.
I was here a month ago. Wasn't it a month ago, the Carif opening?
Yeah, you were here for that one. Yeah. That was, so those ones are up, and that's it.
And that's it.
That's it. The rest is all completely new.
That's the other thing, is getting to come here to a place like this, and obviously you would know the stories like you do about those photos, like getting to sit down and talk to Ed about the album cover for Here You Come Again. Yeah. And you know that he picked her up, and 24 hours later he had a finished album cover with the lettering and everything on it. Like just the fact, like, you know, it's awesome to get to hear those stories.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the stories are part of it for me, a big part of it. Yeah. So whenever I talk to photographers, you know, and I sort of say, you know, we're going to start working together, and the conversation starts with like, okay, can you send me a bio, and do you want to just send me JPEGs of the images you want to do, and I'll curate it together. And then the next question is, tell me the stories behind these, please? And the stories are the best bit.
Yeah,
they really are.
They really are, and it's funny. Those are the things that separate, like, from our conversation. I realized, you're probably the same type of musician kind of person that I am, where you're probably not. Well, I mean, you never know, but you might not find us like in a Motley Crue situation, but more like nerds, like, you know, hey, this guy's got a 1973 Telecaster Deluxe.
This is the worst thing though for me is that I'm a music and a musical instrument nerd. Yeah. And then I'm also an album cover nerd as well. So I kind of like it's like, so we got David Bowie with the Pin-Ups album cover there with Twiggy, the English modeler, and it's like everyone talks about that, and their faces painted to look like robots deliberately, and you sort of think there's this mad concept behind it. But all it was that they had arranged to do the shoot in Paris, and they arrived, and Bowie turned up looking like a ghost because he didn't, you don't see him on the beach often. Twiggy had just been on holiday for 2 weeks in Spain, and then they sort of got together, and they were completely different colours. Yeah. So they were like, okay, well, let's do some face paint, and let's kind of like pull you together a bit. So the makeup artist kind of had a bit of a party, and you now got this really gorgeous kind of album cover that's really kind of enigmatic, and it's just something about it. It's really, really cool. But the reason is you know, the face paint wasn't like some mad concepts they'd discussed in meetings before. Right. It was because Twiggy turned up with a suntan. That was it. A
lot of times that's what happens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can't make it up as you go along, you know?
Yeah. It's funny, my favorite, I'm looking at these photos, and I realized, I should say this out loud, my very favorite era of Bowie is the thin, like looking like his look was in the Thin White Duke era. He looked so cool.
Yeah.
And those suits were so bitchin'.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I mean, that's a black and white shot, but there's also a colour shot from that shoot that I've sold one of recently, with that mustard coloured suit, that kind of like greeny mustard. It's such a cool looking suit.
And so all of these prints here are for sale.
Absolutely.
That are everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. That's amazing.
I mean, at the end of the day, we are a retail art gallery. You know, so you can, everything's for sale. Yeah.
Well, man, I love this place. I had a blast coming to that party. It's been great meeting you and talking to you.
Yeah.
Is that Bowie Icon book? That's the one that was advertised on the site.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah.
It's basically, it pulls together all of the best Bowie photographers in one rather large book that you could break a window with if you threw it hard enough.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah.
It's a great book. It's got some cool stuff in there.
Well, Stephen, man, thank you for having me. Everyone, you can find Modern Rocks Gallery at modernrocksgallery.com. Open Thursday through Friday, noon to 5 p.m. Otherwise, by appointment. They're on Springdale in the... what's the name of this?
Canopy. It's the
Canopy.
Art Complex.
The Canopy Art Complex, Building 3. Thanks, dude.
Thanks, mate.
That was Stephen Walker, the owner of Modern Rocks Gallery. Get out there and check out their David Bowie Starman exhibit going on through the end of the year. You can find them at modernrocksgallery.com or just go to the place Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, noon to 5 p.m. Okay? Great conversation with Stephen. I had a great conversation. It was very hard for me not to ask him to start a band because I really was in love with his guitar playing, and he's a Telecaster bro. He's my tele bro. Anyway, great place, Modern Rocks Gallery. Get out there and check it out, modernrocksgallery.com. And hey, gang, while you're out there checking out Modern Rocks Gallery, don't forget that you can subscribe to this podcast wherever it is that you find podcasts. Every Tuesday and every Friday, I've got new shows. I'm also dropping From the Vault shows on Saturdays, on Saturday nights, late. Sorry. So you can check them out on Sundays is what I mean. From the Vault, like old episodes is what I'm talking about. All right. Follow us, Apple Podcast, Spotify, TuneIn, Overcast, all the places where you find podcasts. We're there. New shows every Tuesday and every Friday, and a lot of From the Vault episodes. Have a great weekend, whatever it is you're doing. If you're listening to this the day that it comes out, come out and see Skyrocket tonight, Friday, November 18th in Dripping Springs at Mercer Dance Hall. Do it, people. Let's get down.
There's such a lot